Sorry, Getter. Can't wait forever for you. All right, we'll figure that out later. So hopefully you all just move to Rumble. It's a shorter. We're gonna do a Q&A today. All right, I figured just keep it simple for the week, right? It should be a good one though. All right, first and foremost, let's look at the court cases before we get into what's going on with Rasmussen. And it's possible here at 538 Cave, since their old founder now came out, he doesn't want to be associated with this, even though he coined this behavior. That was his brand. So I don't know why he's so upset about what they're doing to Rasmussen. Rasmussen's real sin, if we're being honest, folks, is that they ask questions that pollsters generally are not supposed to ask. And they talk to people that they don't want other pollsters to talk to. So really, in the end, to dumb it down, they're offering a point of view that they're offering public opinion instead of trying to shape it. And the media doesn't like that. Let's get real. All right. If I was them, and I can tell you they're not going to respond, and we'll get into this in more detail. But if I was them, I would just send a letter back, saying, when you explain how your fake model, is wrong every year, until you can do that and provide me details about how do you rate pollsters? Exactly how much of each of these data points? What are their weights? How much do you weight for polling data? How much do you weight for historical vote preferences and demographics? And what makes up your model? Oh, it's proprietary. So is our likely voter mile. So go stick it up here. You know what? That's the end of it. And until you can do that, then I'm going to have to humbly request you no longer use our poll and your fake model anymore. So first, speaking of polls, the Supreme Court this week, although I would argue a lot of people I saw responding on Twitter, they're happy about some of these other decisions, but the election one with North Carolina was a big loss for Republicans in North Carolina, in the Tar Heel state here. And I've told this story before. A lot of you don't understand what happened here. Governor Cooper, and this is a court case that the Supreme Court upheld the other day. They upheld the decision by the then liberal North Carolina Supreme Court. But what happened here is more complicated than what the media is trying to say. Governor Cooper wanted to Medicaid expansion. Republicans fought him on it, and he went into territory historically that the state had never been in before without having a budget for such a long duration of time. He was playing chicken with the budget. He blinked, and he lost. And he lost when Senate leadership on the Democratic side, his own party, caved and then called the governor and said, we can't go down this road with you anymore. The polls are getting very ugly. You're going to wind up, and I'm telling you, they told him this, you're going to wind up wiping us out in the state legislature. And we're going to be suffering under a Republican supermajority for the remainder of your term. Not that he wanted to listen, he just really didn't have any choice. He had no backing, he had no support. So not only did Republicans get a bunch of other stuff that they wanted, they got the map, the congressional district map, and Governor Cooper signed off on it. They didn't really care, they being Democrats, because at the end of the day, they just ran that map to the court. Anyway, that decision by the Supreme Court settled that debate. That started there once and for all. And that was not a good decision for the right. Now, everything else that's followed has been affirmative action, which, in case people did not see Michelle Obama's statement yesterday, she has said she's not going to run for president. But that statement yesterday sure sounded like somebody who's exploring a presidential run. All right, so we'll see. We'll see where that goes. But the fact of the matter is, she put out a statement saying that is a sad day for America and told her tale about when she went to college. That's all very cute and everything. But the bottom line is, for people who are supposed to champion, those who are treated unfairly in this society, affirmative action has A, always been unpopular, and B, is not just something that hurt whites. Asians were the most negatively impacted by the policy of affirmative action, college admissions using race as a predominant factor in deciding who will and will not be admitted into school. Now, this is part into their college, right? This is part of one of those policies of the post-civil rights movement that really went too far. So you're supposed to be equal, right? And everybody's supposed to be treated equal. Yet this was one of several policies that, in fact, did not seek equality, but actually was seeking out unequal treatment in society, and one that puts down the majority, whether they are the best candidate or not, or the best one for the job or not, or the best one to be admitted in the school or not. In place of meritocracy, they place this ideological scale on things in society. And that's what reigned for decades. Now, that's it. It's gone. It's done. And that, along with, Roe v. Wade, there's some big ones that this court has handed Team Trump huge talking points and huge victories. All right. So that's obviously going to be a big deal going forward in the presidential campaign. Let's talk about how people, because at the end of the day, ideology came first. Nobody cared that the American people did not support this. All right. So, what Americans think about affirmative action in college admissions. A majority of Americans support affirmative action in higher education and in the workplace, according to a recent PBS News NPR Marist poll. I point this out because you're going to see these in the presidential election, and it's important to know what polls are really out there. 538 of all people just put out something that said, in fact, most Americans do not support affirmative action. And then you have the NPR Marist poll come out and do something completely different. All right. So here's CBS, which is, we've been talking about these different categories of polls. Here's CBS, never in this category. This is new. CBS News poll finds most colleges shouldn't factor race into admissions. There's a slew of Gallup data on it. The New York Times said, well, it's complicated. But in our most recent poll, a majority, and let me pause this because I don't want to hear them, a majority feels that race should not be a factor. The Marist poll is one. I'm sorry, there's just no nice way to put this. Is one of the most, I don't want to, how could I put this nicely with still getting my point across? They slant the order of questions and how they ask these questions in order to get a result that they find to be, I think, beneficial to their own view. All of this matters because we're going to be talking about Rasmussen soon and what Elliott had the nerve to send them. I've polled affirmative action probably a half a dozen times in my career. It's not been a huge thing with us. I have never found, sometimes it was a plurality, but most times not. I've never found support more than opposition. Never. I don't know how you could even do that. I just don't know how. But this was one that was, it's recent. This is very recent, the 21st of June. The American public feels that many groups face discrimination today and widely believes that racism remains a problem in the country, at least to some degree, but is more closely divided over affirmative action as a general policy. All right. Affirmative action programs should be continued, abolished, but using race as a predominant factor has never really been supported. All right. So let me, speaking which, let's get the, where I must have put it. Here it is. So I wonder what could possibly be at the heart of all this, by the way. Let's go through. They have some of the most robust. They do. Here we go. Now, take that all into consideration. I should have showed you how they word the other question. They say it shouldn't be abolished by a few points, but then say race shouldn't be a factor. Again, it's how you ask these questions. Look at Rasmussen's been doing this for years. July 9, 2018, most oppose affirmative action in college admissions. Only 40% favor affirmative action. And where are you going? Yeah. What's the next one? 49% oppose, 29% favor. This has been going on for many, 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 many years. And while Gallup actually, I I don't know, they showed like a trend of it rising. The fact is, it never really was sold to the American public. And if Pew Research actually found that 50% say that it should not be a factor, 38% say it should be a factor. All right, so it really comes down to how you ask the question, but 25% when you go all the way back to 2013. As time has gone on, it's grown. But for the most part, it has never been popular. And it's been one of these things that were kind of just pushed on to the American public, and with the hope that these top-down programs will become part of the culture, part of things that society just accepts. And you can see if you wait long enough and if you construct the debate the way you want it to be constructed, you can be successful in doing that, especially with these huge social bias campaigns we see in the information society that we live in today. You know what the right answer is supposed to be. If you say you oppose affirmative action, then it's like inherently, it's an insinuation that then you must be racist. And if you do this for decade after decade after decade, you can turn a supermajority into a slight majority of opposition. But nevertheless, it was still not widely supported. Never was. All right. So when you go back and forth, this is now 2012. You can see the general thing here. Even voters in California, this one's actually, they redid that recently. But you can see all through the years what Rasmussen has found about it, with the most recent one being in 2018. And why would they pull this in 2018? Because Trump's Supreme Court. Americans have mixed feelings, but most agree that the Trump administration's decision to reverse Obama-era policies that made race a deciding factor in college admissions. 53% of American adults believe it is better for higher education in the United States if colleges and universities accept only the most qualified students for admissions. That would be meritocracy. So we have this case and we have the student loan forgiveness. When we were polling in 2022, even in some of these very college-educated white districts, my God, what is that behind me? Even in some of these very college-educated white districts, for the most part, people opposed this if they were wealthy and what we call part of the new Democratic coalition. They didn't like it. They paid their own, but the reasons were actually really illuminating. We talked about this a little bit in the book club last week. Those rich white people, all right, didn't oppose Biden's student loan forgiveness plan because it was a matter of fairness, right? They didn't oppose it because they felt that the budget could bust. They paid their own and were unwilling to pay other people's. It's kind of funny because in just about everything else that they don't have that direct, why does this matter? They're college-educated voters. They're okay with redistributing wealth all over the rest of society. But when it came to something they personally had to pay themselves, and, maybe we can give a helping hand to others, they were unwilling to do it. This is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but this group, this coveted group everyone keeps talking about, was also the same group who would say, I'm all right. I don't care about inflation. I actually do care more about the abortion issue. Well, what about inflation doesn't bother me. I'm good. I'm wealthy. I'm doing all right. Well, what about your fellow American who's not doing all right? I don't give a damn. They're probably one of the most spoiled, selfish groups in the entire society. For many people it takes, especially if you have higher education, like advanced education, it could take you 20 years to pay off a student loan, folks, or student loans in totality. I have some left, but I don't care. I absolutely support this decision. I don't care that this decision personally hurts me. It does not hurt me as much as it would have 10 years ago, but it still personally hurts me. I don't care. To me, I don't view it like that. I just view it as like, this is about character. and about building character and making decisions that have consequences and having to deal with the consequences of those decisions. Going to college isn't a bad idea for some, but maybe you did not study something that you could apply to the real world. That's my fault. That's other people's fault. Again, these rich people weren't thinking along those lines, nor the lines of there's a ton of other working class people who never went to college, and yet their tax dollars are going to pay for others who did and don't produce. They didn't care at all about that. They didn't care about that point of view. To them, it was more about their own selfish interests. And I guess that's a collection of what society is, right? Self-governing societies. People vote on their own collection, their own self-interest. But it doesn't mean when you're looking at policy, you can't look at the principle of the policy and how it might impact other people, or at least maybe you should. Anyway, major victories for Team Trump. This will be added to Roe v. Wade. And when we're looking at a state like Iowa, where DeSantis, I don't think anybody else has the money to do this yet, or at least not yet they do. It doesn't appear to be working. We're really going to find out, and no offense to you DeSantis people out there, if you're angry by this, then, I mean, don't get mad at me. This is what the campaign is doing. It's actually the PAC doing it, which is literally attempting to buy precinct captains and caucus goers. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. Will it end up in votes is another question, because we now have Roe v. Wade. We now have the ending of affirmative action, the striking down of Joe Biden's supreme student loan forgiveness. I hate it when the media says it's a plan. It wasn't a plan. It was an executive order. It's not a plan. The plan is I'm going to sign an executive order. I'm going to decree it that other people have to pay off other people's responsibilities. That's not a plan, folks. That's a royal decree. In any event, that's going to be really hard for anyone, not just DeSantis, but anybody to counter in the state of Iowa, especially Roe v. Wade. But this is now just one after the other after the other. And it comes about 3 weeks after the DeSantis campaign literally attacked Trump's court. I would have appointed better justices. It's a hard argument to make. Oh, yeah, it's great. They did great with these issues, but I would have done better. Especially when every Republican candidate for president over the last 4 decades has promised to appoint justices that would in fact rule like Trump's court rules. It didn't happen. It was one betrayal after the other. George W. Bush is one of us. He's going to get it done. No, he's going to give you Justice Roberts. In fact, he's going to give, think about this, folks. He told evangelicals in Iowa and the rest of the country he was one of them, and then gave them a justice that affirmed gay marriage. Now, gay marriage has never been my hill to die on, but this is what is in the minds of voters. This is what they remember. And with every ruling like this, it reminds them why they supported this like crass, brass, abrasive, offensive, aggressive billionaire from New York City. Because it was, put simply, something different than the usual. And the usual was constant disappointment, constant letdowns, and constant failure. So it's going to be very hard for any candidate to say, take a risk on something else. What they're really asking them to do is risk going backward and risk going back to the way things were before. And you can sit down with Jesse Waters and tell him it's going to be different. It's going to be different for you this time. but that's not really the norm that they're used to. What they're used to is politicians do a lot of promising and then fail them every step of the way. And in fact, let me get this. Somebody from Locals put this up. This is a great example. Let me get it. I'm the guy to do it, he says. I'm the guy to do it. He's asked about loyalty here, but then he gets into what I'm talking about. All right. And here it is. Primetime has pizza with DeSantis. Now, Waters has been a pretty strong supporter or surrogate of Trump. So, this was wondering whether this would be a challenging interview. At the end of the day, it wasn't. Here we go. Here's Jesse Waters. He asks him about loyalty, and then he gets into, I'm loyal. He gets offended by it actually and says, I'm loyal to God. I'm loyal to my family, and goes in to say that I'm loyal to the voter is what he's really trying to say, although it doesn't come across right. And he says, I would do it better. And that's a hard case to make.
You feel that way? Disloyal to who? I mean, politicians have to earn support. They're not entitled to support. I did a lot.
Just got to stop. Politicians have to earn support. They're not entitled to support. He didn't earn anything. Can we get real for a second? Ron DeSantis didn't earn anything. Adam Putnam was around. Adam Putnam did the hard work. Adam Putnam was going to beat him if it wasn't for Donald Trump, who he asked to get around that earning of the vote. This is something that a lot of people really just they're not being intellectually honest here. He did not earn the MAGA vote. Donald Trump gave it to him. He was in Congress voting for TPP. He voted for everything Paul Ryan wanted him to vote for. If he was some kind of pioneer in America First in Congress, then that would be different. He entertained, and I'm being nice by saying this, he entertained the Russia collusion hoax. He said unflattering things about Devin Nunes when he walked to the microphone outside the White House and said, something went wrong here. He thought it would be a great idea to give Bob Mueller a chance. After all, he's a straight shooter. He didn't earn the MAGA vote. This is something that he doesn't want to acknowledge, but he does his best to get around.
A lot for him in 2016 and 2020, by the way, was happy to do it. But at the end of the day,
he did nothing for him in 2016. Nothing. We were there. He did nothing. Nobody did anything. They abandoned Donald Trump in 2016. The Florida delegation abandoned him. Reince Priebus at the RNC abandoned him. Grassroots people like Miami Cubans for Trump. The ground pounders in Greater Alachua to keep the margin down from Gainesville. The door knockers who didn't give up on him. The campaign surrogates. And the candidate himself. He got no help from electeds and no help from the party. That is just a fact.
I'm loyal to my family, to our Constitution, and to the good Lord. And I have a vision. I think I'm the guy that can beat Biden. But even more importantly, no more excuses on these issues. I'm going to get all of this stuff done. We'll have a plan on day one to get going and get cracking. We'll give you 2 great terms for 8 years and really get the country on a fundamentally different path. I think I'm the guy to do it. And so I have the responsibility to step up and serve.
ooh, thank you, Elon. Thank you. All right. So point I was, now I got to go back and say that all the time. Let me see if I can reverse time here in my head. Thank you, Bio Mom, for the one gift you gave me. I said, and I think I can quote this verbatim, you're asking people to take a chance. He says, I'm going to get no more excuses. I'm going to get this stuff done. And the irony of it is that for 4 decades, there were excuses why they couldn't get Roe v. Wade overturned. Affirmative action was huge in the 90s and the 2000s during the Bush years. And there were nothing but excuses why this couldn't get done. And I quote, student loan forgiveness had been hanging over the head of conservatives like the sword of Damocles for years. And now it's decided. It is not possible for a liberal president to force you to pay for someone else's student loans. And I'm confused as to why people like, and I don't think it's fair to call her a liberal anymore, which is what I said when I was muted, but people like Megyn Kelly get this more than people who are supposedly Republican, who are supposedly MAGA, the MAGA without the drama. Decades and decades of excuses are now down the drain. And if you don't recognize that this week is yet another affirmation about why they took a risk on this guy 6 years ago, it's a reaffirming that support that they had from them. If you can't recognize that, and you do, folks, 3 weeks ago, Ron DeSantis and his campaign were attacking Trump's justices. They were attacking the Trump court. We'll do better. How could you do better? After decades of disappointment and failure, disappointment for the voters and failures for the Republican leaders, Roe v. Wade is gone. Affirmative action is out. The massive wealth redistribution plan that they had in place, which is like a reverse wealth redistribution. It's really weird. Student loan forgiveness is like wealth redistribution only from the bottom to the top. And now that's gone. They don't have to worry about that sword coming down on them anymore. I just don't understand how people don't see that you're asking a vast majority of the vote to take a chance on you when they already know that they got this from this guy, and chances are he's probably learned a lot from his mistakes. Why would I take a chance on somebody who hasn't made those mistakes yet? We're not sure, he's not proven to be equipped to even deal with the kind of pressure that the other guy has already dealt with and weathered. It's a heavy, heavy, heavy lift. And it's a bit ridiculous. Then nobody can see it. Put on locals the other day. It's now get ready for the debates. It's now wait till there wasn't a single debate yet. Wait until there's a debate. It's one after the other. The strategy isn't working, and it's not working for that reason, for all of the reasons we were just talking about. And it's not going to change with a debate. It's not going to change with an announcement or some kind of cool stump speech. You must have a presidential justification. And right now, nobody in this time, in this era, has demonstrated what that justification is for them. Or what do I even mean by that? Why are you the candidate right now, in this time, in this epoch? Why are you, for this moment, the best man or woman to deal with the problems ahead? Why are you the one who is most equipped? Why are you the one who is most in tune? Do you understand what's going on with people's lives today? You understand the dangers of the moment. Why are you that person? That's the truth. All of these things are just kind of like symptoms of this. They're secondary to this, that they just don't seem to have a justification. He tried to outline it at the end of that interview, and his justification was, I'm such a good leader that loyalty can't really be a concern to me. I'm such a good leader that I have a duty to stand up. That's crazy. I had to run for president because I'm the best thing since sliced bread. That's what he told Jesse. I mean, that is what he was saying. That's not going to work. Nikki Haley's justification, it's about 2 decades too old. Mike Pence is grossly unpopular. I just don't understand where these people think they're going with this. Doesn't make any sense. Also, there's I want to jump before we get to Rasmussen. I want to jump over to, of all people, CNN. All right. Because there's another controversy that they're in the struggle to find a way to separate themselves from Donald Trump. Some of these candidates have gone out on a real limb and done some crazy stuff. Let's stick with DeSantis. To try to beat Trump in Iowa, despite being the president who appointed justices to overturn Roe v. Wade, affirmative action, now this, and then, by the way, the tariffs. He ate a tariff sandwich. The farmers that supported Trump in Iowa, many of them, Obama people too, support those tariffs. But in an effort to try to outflank Donald Trump, DeSantis supported that 6-week ban. And there's a host of other issues that he's gone against him on in the hope to appeal to conservative white people in the caucus. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Conservative, white, and I think this is a little bit pretentious, and I think it's probably a miscalculation because white evangelical conservatives that I know are not the same that maybe they were 20, 30 years ago. So when you're talking about an issue, and I'm getting into criminal justice reform, these are people who have the most capacity for forgiveness in our society. I really believe that, or they're at least among the groups that have the greatest capacity to forgive and give people second chances. It's in their nature. It's in their faith. So I'm not seeing I'm not seeing the wisdom in the decision to go against him in the First Step Act, all right, which we're going to bring up right now. All right, so why do I think this matters? The electability argument is one of the DeSantis campaign's go-to arguments, yet everything he's doing to try to outflank Trump is killing him in a general election. 6-week abortion bans, goodbye Michigan. Anti-criminal justice reform, goodbye Rust Belt. You will get no non-white support. All right, first, before I get into my own on this, I'm going to read the K-File. Andrew Kaczynski and M. Steck. Andrew runs the K-File over there, which is something that basically says they do like a dive into people's past historical records and see whether or not what they're saying now really lines up. And honestly, you better double check them. Ron DeSantis voted for the First Step Act and hailed its successes. He now calls it the jailbreak bill. On the campaign trail, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has attacked Donald Trump's signature prison reform bill, calling it a jailbreak bill and claiming it allowed dangerous people out of prison who have now reoffended and really, really hurt a number of people. But as a congressman, DeSantis voted for the House version of the bill in May 2018, containing some of the same provisions he and his campaign now condemn. A CNN K-File review with DeSantis' comments as a congressman and governor also found that he once supported early release from some prisoners and said he was open to easing mandatory minimum guidelines provisions in the First Step Act, the prison reform bill. He now says he would repeal. Now, I have to tell you, the Senate bill is the one that became law. However, Doug Collins, that worked on the House bill, he's in this article. He will respond to this. The fact of the matter is, they're trying to say, well, once it got to the Senate, it just got too liberal and went off the rails. That's not true. Second of all, it would make sense if after the passage of that bill, you would have said that. But you didn't. You praised it. And everybody on your team and in your campaign and who's worked for you as governor praised it. You once said it would be the template to use in Florida. So this is, again, another flip-flop. It's an effort to try to find that presidential justification, to find this separation, something to distinguish yourself. When in a race where a popular former president, popular in his party for sure, that's what I'm talking about, is obviously the clear frontrunner, an attempt to break out. His entire team that once were Trump supporters and now never Trumpers, Christina Pushaw, Ken Cuccinelli, and my old pal Steve Cortez, all praised it before and after the passage. But there's something else that I can't really get in my head for this, and we'll talk about it. Hold on, let me as we read this, I'll phase into it here. At the end of the day, I want to keep the public safe, DeSantis said in a March 2019 news conference. I want to hold people accountable, but I also recognize that there are, some instances in which, folks have paid their debt and we are probably wasting money if they're not a threat to society. And so we're going to look at that. Before we continue, I just got to say on the merits, the intellectual merits of this argument, it's very weak. The recidivism rate for people, and that means the reoffense rate, people who are released from prison and then commit other crimes. The recidivism rate for those released because of the First Step Act is almost 4 times lower than the recidivism rate for the general population. DeSantis' turn on the prison reform bill mirrors the changing political winds on criminal justice reform, once more popular among Republicans. And here's a polling idea, which I'm going to start, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. This, I would very much like to poll this again. We polled this around the time that DeSantis made, I actually thought it was 2018. It was not. It was 2019. We polled something close in 2018, more generally about criminal justice reform and some of the provisions. But in 2019, we did quite a bit on this, and it was overwhelmingly popular. Even and that's true even among Republicans. Remember, Van Jones went to a CPAC, patently said that Trump's going to win. Trump. They were clearly worried Trump would win a greater share of the non-white vote because now he and Republicans like Chuck Grassley and others were the ones. And Orrin Hatch, by the way, was also someone who was a great advocate before he left the Senate of criminal justice reform. He was worried that Republicans were outflanking Democrats on the issue of criminal justice reform. The bill was very, very popular to include the provisions. I don't think that it's any more unpopular now. I really don't. I think even if support among Republicans fell, it was so overwhelmingly popular with independents and Democrats, it would still have majority support. But I don't think it's going to, look, we'll find out because I do want to poll this, but I would be surprised. I think it's more likely that a small minority of, I don't even want to call them law and order Republicans because Trump was a law and order Republican. Nixon was a law and order Republican, yet both believed in the principles of a bill like this. I want to say this is the elitist worldview. The law and order elitist worldview, where it's just like somebody does something wrong, you throw them away, you lock up the key, and you just expel them from society, and that's it. For as long as you possibly can. No matter what. No matter what your faith says, no matter what the data says. I just want to be a hard ass because, frankly, my life has been pretty damn privileged, and I don't really care about anybody else. So I'm curious to see whether Republicans have really changed the way that Andrew is suggesting they have in this article. I'm skeptical. Though the bill was signed into law in December 2018 with overwhelming bipartisan support, spikes in crime during the pandemic have shifted the politics on the issue, with more Republicans favoring the tough on crime approaches that the party has historically embraced. That's why the party historically gets their ass kicked. That's why the party historically can't win the Rust Belt. That's why the party historically is lucky to win Ohio by a point or two. That's why the party historically can't win Iowa. Quote, one of the things I would want to do as president is to go to Congress and seek the repeal of the First Step Act. If you are in jail, you should serve your time. And the idea that they're releasing people who have not been rehabilitated early so they can prey on people in our society is a huge, huge mistake, DeSantis told the very big con figure Ben Shapiro podcast last month. Crime rose because of the pandemic. Crime rose because when there's economic pain, it leads to more crime. That's like social science 101. Overall, according to the Department of Justice statistics, the recidivism rate, criminal acts that result in rearrest, conviction, or return to prison, was 12. I'm actually wrong. I understated it. Sorry. I knew it was ballpark this. I haven't looked it up in a while. The recidivism rate was 12.4% with inmates released because of the First Step Act. It's 49.3 overall. So I was actually wrong. I said almost a quarter or almost 4 times lower. No, it's more than that. Almost a fifth. His campaign claims the bill became significantly more liberal, a charge disputed by the bill's lead Republican sponsor, and that DeSantis would have voted against the final version. Listen, maybe there could be some tweaks, but that number says it all. There are always going to be cases that are going to buck the overall trend. It's like anything with statistics. You could say, in general, Republicans have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump because, let's say, in the Morning Consult poll, it's like 83 or 85%. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be 13 or 15% who don't. But overwhelmingly, the statement is still true that Republicans have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump. You understand what I'm saying? There may be these cases that the DeSantis campaign, and they've done it. The release of a convicted terrorist financier who was freed due to compassionate release provisions in the law. They point to that instance. And by the way, that provision DeSantis voted for. You can have these cases because no law is going to be perfect, but it doesn't mean the bill is not successful overall. It is. The recidivism rate says it all, folks. They've also attacked good time credit, which can reduce a prisoner's sentence for good behavior, even though the House bill DeSantis voted for allowed significantly more people to receive earned and good time credits than the Senate version that became law, which included a much more robust list of excluded offenses. Some good Christians here, Laura, aren't they? Hold on. Can I just say it? That's some fake-ass Christianity for you. Did Christ come for the elitists in society who were former federal prosecutors? If Christ was to come back today and do a redo of what he did 2,000 years ago, would he come down and praise federal prosecutors from Abu Ghraib? Who would he give his attention to? It's fake. That's fake faith. It's amazing to me that up until 6 weeks ago, Ron DeSantis had never said a bad thing about the First Step Act. Collins added. And what he said first was, DeSantis voted for the bill, which, by the way, to say it was less, quote, liberal. I love this line where you can tell we're in an election mode. The bill actually in the House had more good time credit provisions. Thank you, Doug. DeSantis' campaign has also pointed to retroactive application of the Fair Sentencing Act, which allowed more than 4,226 federal prisoners serving since reformed mandatory minimum crack sentences to motion the court for resentencing as one main reasons DeSantis would have opposed the final bill. Those who worked with Congress and the White House on the bill's passage, like Holly Harris, the former president and executive director of Justice Action Network, the country's largest bipartisan criminal justice reform organization, noted DeSantis seemed to pick and choose which provisions of the bill were so-called jailbreak ones. It's too cute by half, Harris told CNN. And it doesn't change the fact they've already gone out there and criticized the provisions that he voted for. They've already done that. It's not as if he came out after passage of the Senate bill and railed against it and said he opposed it. That's exactly right. And the bottom line is, I don't need to go through the K-file stuff, but they will show you instances of Pushaw, Cortez, Cuccinelli after passage of the bill, praising it, praising his support for it, praising the president for leading on it. They will say we should do something like that in Florida. This would cripple DeSantis in a general election. Cripple him. The argument doesn't hold water. The merits of the argument are extremely weak. There are always exceptions you can point to, but it's not going to outweigh the popularity of these provisions in this bill. And it's not smart, and it sure as hell is not Christian. Penalizing offenders to the max regardless of mitigating circumstances or provisions outlined in the bill, and throwing them out on the street after they serve their max is stupid. And guess what? It results in a much higher recidivism rate. That's a fact. Fact. It's undisputed. You could try to argue, but you will sound like an idiot. And for the locals, you're going to know this, but food for thought, folks. Wyatt Earp was a drunken, violent offender and a horse thief who was going to be hung before he became the most famous lawman in the West. Thank God for those mitigating circumstances and his good family and his family's good reputation. Otherwise, it would have been a very different situation for Dodge City and Tombstone. Thank God for them, he did. This is overall, we could talk about this as a form of policy, but it really is a return to the elitism of the Bush era Republican. That's what this is. Doesn't matter what the facts are. I just want to do it because I have a different view of what society should be. And you can hear it when you hear people attack Hunter Biden, not for his criminal activity, but for his extracurricular activity. You can hear it when you listen to people talk about this issue now. Do you know how badly a Democrat would drum you on the head? You think you're going to get Hispanic support opposing something like this? Dan is one of, I got to put this up. The WASPs are back, Dan. That's right. That's exactly right. It's unbelievable that they would choose this as a matter of, but they're not thinking forward enough to the general election. They are just, can we get real? They're banking everything on Iowa, and they're hoping that Iowans are more WASP and less, I want to say the word progressive in the true sense of the word, the way that our founders use the word progressive. You know, society tends to overreact. And in the 90s, even though it was at the behest, it is all true that it was all at the behest of non-white communities. Bill Clinton and Republicans worked together. They were much harsher on criminals. Certain criminals, though, got caught up with it. And it turned out that we overreacted. This was an attempt to respond to that overreaction. And maybe it can be made better, but it's unbelievable that they would want to do this again, considering how Democrats would absolutely bludgeon you over this. is it really this bad that I need to repeat that there aren't enough white people in this country to win an election like that anymore? That there are too many white liberals who will never vote for you anyway? That the only reason why it was a 45,000 vote margin is because of how much better he did among non-whites in 20 than he did in 16? Does nobody understand what a trend means? I thought these were supposed to be super smart people. It's unbelievable. 10 years goes a long way. Life of Brian made a good comment. Let me write. Rich, as recently as 2014, awful Republicans, neocons, Romneys, had strong wins in the Senate. How much do you think changed in 10 years? That's a great question. 10 years is an effing long time in politics. It's a long time in a nation. As diverse as this one and as ever changing, and coalitions are always evolving. It's a really long time. But what has also changed is how much more people are participating every election cycle. 2014 was an abysmal turnout. We're now in the 60 range for a midterm. 60s. 2010 was 30 something percent, if I remember correctly. 30, 33. It was horrible. 2014 was not any better. What was the year? I'll get it for you because it's important. Overall turnout rate. Let me, I have it, and oh man, I was actually even wrong. 2010 was a little bit more. 2010, 41.8% of total ballots out of the percentage of eligible voters was cast. For higher office, it was only 41%. But in 2014, 36.7% of total ballots cast as a percentage of eligible voters was cast nationwide, and 36% for higher office. So turnout was only 36% in 2014. That's a terrible. So the point is, a lot of these lower participation voters who Republicans have it used to be going back to 14 and 10 and 8 and 04 even and 2000, I mean, until the era of Trump in 16. Lower turnouts are what Republicans were crossing their fingers and praying for every election. Because if the other people came out, if low participation people came out, Republicans would lose. Now, it's really about getting those low participation rates out so Republicans can have a chance. And it's a total different change. And that's where we're at now. And what they're doing is threatening to not only potentially keep those voters home, but I mean, there will be scores of low participation minorities who will vote against you because they think of you as somebody who is a snob. Is there any other way to put it? A snob? A snob elitist who doesn't really care about the plight of the everyday American. It's also, again, very different than the 2018, 2019 Republican, this is the Christian thing to do mantra. You know, you can punish people justly, but then still have true compassion, true forgiveness. You look like a hypocrite. This kind of mindset is actually what's been hurting. I mean, along with church failures of church leadership, is what John O'Shea earlier this week. He was 100% gave a speech. He was 100% correct. He was talking about the reason for the decline of the country overall, and one of them has been the failure of the church. But the last one was us, how we have personally behaved. During the Bush era, during the Bushes, hell, even during Reagan. Look at Jimmy Swaggart. The image of hypocritical Christians did the church damage. And Gallup, by the way, had a great study on this years ago. Then, of course, you had the issues with the Catholic Church. And all this just makes you look like a hypocrite to these people. Add something like this to the mix, and you're just like a total fraud. Bible thumping hypocrites. I'm not voting for the Bible thumping hypocrites who only care about big donors, war, big business. That's how you'll get cornered. You'll get painted into that corner. That's how they're going to look at you. And again, it doesn't even make sense because, I mean, I was wrong. If the K file is right, I probably was looking at an older number, but if the K file was right, the recidivism rate for those released under the First Step Act is actually much, much lower than I said and thought it to be. So it's stupid. It's just dumb. It doesn't even make sense policy-wise. It doesn't make sense. You're always going to be able to point out some example here and there. But what these numbers show you is that, so really, if you're really being intellectually honest, then what you really want to do is just permanently remove these people from society, right? If the recidivism rate is, you could give them the max, and when they come out, it's a coin toss. Those numbers, 49 point whatever, that's a coin toss. It means when you slap somebody that hard, not even slap, when you throw the book at somebody like that, they learn in prison to be a career criminal. They lose all of that time to gain another skill and to reform themselves. Now, I am not saying you don't punish people accordingly for their crimes. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is you don't lump everybody in the same basket and then just try to exclude, like remove them from society forever. It is a coin toss when those people come out, whether or not they're actually going to be able to be law-abiding citizens. This bill sought to find people that were good candidates to reform and re-enter into society, to preserve the families of, I mean, folks, somebody's mother or father gets locked up for something, a mistake they made. I mean, some of these things are family destroying. And it looks like it's working. Would we expect nobody to reoffend? That would be stupid. That's not honest. In their world, which sounds like a very liberal or a left-wing kind of Marxist-like worldview, you just want to dig a big hole and throw them all in there? That would be super Christian. We got to remove them somewhat, right? Because when they get out anyway, they're going to reoffend at a higher rate, and then you're really going to be pissed. What do you want to do with these people? Be honest. Unbelievable. And by the way, you should probably worry about the malaria, the outbreak in your state. That's what engineering mosquitoes may do. I don't know. We'll find out what caused it. But, genetic engineering, I'll tell you what, the last time these people do play with insects in the state to try to deal with certain things. So far, I've never seen it work out. I don't know why they continue to do this, but I don't know, Laura. I don't know if you saw that or not. I'll send it to you. But my God, it's scary. I should probably just leave insects alone. All right. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll look at what's going on with Rasmussen. Okay. It's unbelievable. I'm going to read you and we're going to go point by point on, let's take the break and we'll come back and we'll talk about it. I want to jump ahead. Genetically modified mosquitoes could take out your grid, folks. Seriously. Extremists, stupidity, all threatening the power grid. If 9 key substations were to go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. Then those genetically modified mosquitoes are going to have a field day. That's why you need a solar generator. The new Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your refrigerator. Right now, you can get one if you go to 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10, knock 10% off at checkout. This code is for your first purchase only, so make it count. That's 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 to get your Patriot Power Generator today. And send me everybody loves these things. Honestly, I got a generator at my house. I still wanted a solar generator. It really is Just incredible. The best deal on our newest solar generator. First time ever you get 2 free solar panels. And that deal ends on the 5th. And you use the code TPP10. You will get a great deal getting those panels and the generator plus 10% off of them all. Make it count, folks. Make it count. I don't know. By the way, it's June 30th. I don't know if they're re-upping for the month of July. So if you are really on the fence about doing this, do it now. Okay? All right. Yeah, I know. Spy, you got one. I don't want to. I know a lot of others that have one too, and I don't want to just throw them out there, but they're awesome, folks. They really are. One more time, for Patriots, TPP 10. They're awesome. Guess what I had for breakfast this morning? Laura made homemade pancakes, and we actually used the pure Michigan Gold maple syrup. My kids loved it. The Amasa Gold. It is June 30th. Probably continue. I haven't had confirmation on that, but while you can get this deal, jamandbean.com, a new subscription, if you use the code TPP40, will knock 40% off of your new subscription cost. Plus, you'll still get 10% off every month when you re-up on your subscription. These guys are this is not only a Patriot owned company, but they are amazing at what they do, folks, which is roast gourmet, delicious coffee. Their popcorn is out of this world, and they are pandemic champions. I'm just going to put it like that. All right. Look at, by the way, you see that K-Cup construction right there? I can tell you they are the only company that has a true medium, full-bodied K-Cup. Nobody else has what they have. You can try and go to the supermarket and get a medium roast from Starbucks, and you're going to get a whole bunch of dark roast that they dumb down. That's it. Because it's really quite in the weeds with the science of it. It's really kind of cool. But they're the only ones to figure this out and figure it out right. And when I tell you it's a delicious, but yet medium, full-bodied, they're the only ones who got it. jamandbean.com. Use the code TPP40 at checkout. All right. And by the way, that syrup is delicious. It is amazing. Yeah, well, that's right. Texas, anywhere. Oh my God, Rich, Texas was hot this week. And I'm used to heat. Florida, 15 years in the state of Florida. I mean, humid heat. And it was apparently when I got there, it was not humid anymore. It had been the week before, but it was super, super dry. Woo! That's heat, folks. That's heat. But it was a great trip. Total success. And I'm glad I went. Let's look at this letter Rasmussen reports gets from ABC News, who owns 538, the Nate Silver brand, which he did tweet that he wishes they would stop now using the 538 brand, the 538 name, because it's associated with his name. And he doesn't like what he called this political inquisition. Well, you are the father of the political inquisition into pollsters you don't like. Personal beefs with people, you go after them. If there wasn't direct intervention on behalf of Robert Cahaly by somebody I will not name, he would be banned from 538 as well. So and that's Trafalgar. This is the letter. I think they were correct to go ahead and publish it for everyone to see. There has been universal condemnation. We will find out by the end of today whether or not they are going to make good on this threat, because they have had their former, leader come out and condemn it. But everyone from the Washington Examiner to people at Fox News, there has been generally universal condemnation. Why? Because Rasmussen is a much bigger name. But let's go through, because what Elliot Morris does is mix a bunch of legitimate questions in with a bunch of hypocritical BS. Laura and I were talking yesterday, and it's like there needs to be another word for extreme hypocrisy, because that word doesn't cover what we see almost on a daily basis when it comes to the media. All right. Let me see here. Thought I had a water around. I don't. It's reading. Between the heat in Texas and me being a dumbass absolutely inhaling the muriatic acid I was using. That was so stupid. It was a dumb mistake. I never make dumb mistakes like that. I was cleaning the cell in the pool filter, and I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I wanted to look into the cell to see if it was getting clean, if time was up. And usually you hold your breath, you wear a mask or something. My God, I just inhaled like a jackass, and it felt like fire. But anyway, ABC News, answer our questions or else. I had known about this because I was, pollsters talk to each other. And Mark did let me know that he had received this some time ago, initial email from Elliot Morris and 538. And I believe the initial one, I'd have to go back and check my timeline. We're going to have Mark on Monday to talk about this, by the way. I want to say it was just after Nate Silver was removed from 538, but it was so well thought out that I actually did get the distinct impression this was in the works before. And when you look at the dates of what they were saying, Nate Silver was still there. So they've been on this now for a while, building this case against Rasmussen Reports. The following is the complete text of an email received by Rasmussen Reports this morning, and that was yesterday morning. My name is Elliot Morris, and I am the editorial director of data analytics at ABC News. I am responsible for our editorial analysis of polls, election results, and other data, including the output at ABC's 538. Okay, so you're the guy responsible for the constant misses and narrative wars? Okay, good to know. I'm emailing you to send a final notice, like he's your landlord or something, that 538 is considering formally banning Rasmussen Reports from its coverage. Such a ban would result in being removed from listing on our main polls page and being excluded from all of our aggregation and election forecasting models. If banned, Rasmussen Reports would also be removed from our historical averages of polls and from our pollster ratings. Your surveys would no longer appear in reporting, and we would write an article explaining our reasons for the ban. All right. This is where they come across like they're some kind of an authority in the polling industry. They are not. They act as if, and Mark says in response to the Washington Examiner, he says, they don't have any power over me. They don't have any power over us. Who the hell do they think they are? This is the problem. These are a bunch of non-pollsters pretending like they're experts on polls. That's all 538 has ever been. A pollster at Rasmussen Reports, preferably you, needs to reply to this email with satisfactory comments in order to avoid the ban. To be sure, response alone is, and here's the thing. This is what I told Mark weeks ago. It really doesn't matter what you reply. You're very likely going to end up banned. Why? Because I did this dance. I made the foolish mistake of thinking that Nate Silver at the time was being honest. I was new, it was years and years and years ago. I made the mistake of thinking, folks, I offered full access to the office. I gave them, I told them different softwares we use, the technology we use. I offered to give them passwords to look inside the software so they could see the projects we were doing. The truth is much simpler. They don't like you because you're offering a different take, which is a more accurate take of public opinion. And they want to use this industry to shape public opinion, to push their own opinions. And when they find somebody, like once Rasmussen started talking about the election fraud stuff, they went on their radar. I'm actually surprised once they started doing the vaccination stuff, this didn't come sooner. But they sealed it when they did the survey in Arizona. And you can hear it. Watch. To be sure, response alone is not guaranteed to end in the avoidance of a ban. Well, exactly. Our concerns run much deeper than simple failure to reply to methodological queries, which, for what it's worth, is itself grounds for a ban. and on which we have already given Rasmussen substantial leeway. Before I get into this, I want you to think and consider to yourself all the other polls that you hear about, all the other pollsters, whether they're online panels, they're media, they're university, they're private, they're public, they're internal. Do you know the answers to the questions that they ask about their methodologies? The entire point of Inside the Numbers and the Public Polling Project was to try to raise the bar on what pollsters share with the public about their work. Level 1, even level 2 tier standards of disclosure are just not good enough anymore, considering how badly this industry has performed in the last 2 decades, really. Especially if you consider exit polls. Ask yourself when we get through some of these questions whether you know the answer to these questions when it comes to the Fox poll, the NBC News poll, the ABC News poll, their own poll, ABC News. And remember, this guy has the audacity to write this email when ABC is yet to explain their Biden plus 17 in the state of Wisconsin. Their tracking poll, Clinton plus 14. Come on. First, Rasmussen must explain the nature of its relationship. And by the way, this is first. This is what they chose to write first. They must explain the nature of their relationship with several right-leaning blogs and online media outlets, which have given us reason to doubt the ethical operation of the polling firm. Really? When it comes to the mainstream media, it is universally leftist. Does that lead to questions about the ethical operations of their polling firms? Please tell us whether questions are ever suggested to Rasmussen from these outlets, including Fox News and Steve Bannon's War Room, where Rasmussen's head pollster regularly appears with the promise of coverage in return for public fieldwork. That's not true. Everybody who conducts a poll, ABC News included, expects that their poll will be covered by outlets. Steve Bannon has never said to me, nor has he ever said to Mark Mitchell, if you poll this topic, if you ask this question, then I will have you on War Room. That's not how it works. You do the field work, you put together your releases, you send them out to people. It's called a press release. Everyone does it. You put it on Twitter. People see it. And they say, hey, can you come on the show to talk about the results of your poll? That's how it works. And the funny thing is here, Rasmussen has their own, and it's publicly known. They have people who work at Rasmussen Reports who look at the news and decide what topics are of interest to the American people. We're going to ask about this. This is in the news. Their entire business model is built on the ability to add those issues and topics to their tracking poll, their daily tracking poll, in order to get prescient results, prescient coverage of public opinion as it is unfolding, as these stories are unfolding and these issues and current events are happening with the promise of coverage. Do Rasmussen's pollsters work with anyone from these organizations on topics to consider polling, despite listing polls as unsponsored or sponsored by other groups? That's just questioning your integrity without any evidence. That's a direct question about Mark's integrity and everybody's integrity, frankly. Does the pollster have a close, this one's a real doozy. Does the pollster have a close personal relationship with any of these figures that might cloud their judgment in the operation of a public poll? That is effing hilarious. Did NBC News and their pollsters have to clarify that to Elliot at 538? Hart Research and Public Opinion Strategies jointly conduct the NBC News poll. Hart Research did field work for Hillary Clinton, while, by the way, the NBC News poll was still contracted with him. Public Opinion Strategies is DeSantis' pollster. They have released more than questionable results under Never Back Down sponsorship. And nobody has ever asked them to clarify that relationship. As a reward for those out of the consensus outliers, they now have the contract for the DeSantis campaign. Hart Research was conducting contracted work for Hillary Clinton while polling for NBC. Both the Democratic polling firm and the Republican polling firm, supposed Republican Karl Rove aligned polling firm that jointly conduct the poll for the Fox poll, are constantly in the field for other people. This is a load of crap. Related to this, does Rasmussen Reports believe the results of the 2022 Arizona governor election, as certified by the state's Department of Elections, to be fraudulent, based on the results of a 2023 survey conducted by Rasmussen Reports and sponsored by college Republicans, as it stated, for Mr. Bannon on his programming in April of this year? That's how long they've been at this. So Nate can put out whatever he wants, but Nate was still there in April when they were conducting the switch hunt. The answer to that question is none of your goddamn business. The personal views of the multiple employees who work at Rasmussen are none of your business. Everybody has personal views. Without inspection, every liberal pundit, every liberal so-called forecaster at 538 immediately believed that Joe Biden legitimately won. They weren't waiting for anybody's canvassing work to be done. They weren't waiting for our work to be done, for Matt Brainerd's work to be done, True the Vote's work to be done. They made up their mind immediately. That's their opinion, and they have a right to hold it. Does Rasmussen Reports believe its polls can provide more precise estimates of election results than certified ballot counts by state secretaries of state? This is third world country stuff. Third world country stuff. Let me ask you a question. In the 90s, when the narcos were rigging elections in Mexico, were the public polls more right, or were the official election results that they rigged using a supercomputer, were they more accurate? Does it believe the results of the 2020 election as certified are accurate? Again, none of your damn business. That has absolutely nothing to do with the soundness of their methodology or the accuracy of their track record. And if you were to ask Mark Mitchell, because I know him well, what he would tell you is, it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the American public believes. And because I asked them that question, and we find very different results than people Elliott doesn't question the integrity of, that's why I'm on trial here. What does it view its role as in providing public opinion data on this topic? That, folks, right there tells you that their sin is telling first asking the public what their view is about 2020, and then telling the public their own view. Because, of course, Elliott and his friends, they do not want any more debate on election malfeasance, election integrity issues, the soundness and stability of our elections. They don't want any more debate on that. They want you to believe that all elections are on the up and up and they're never tampered with, especially when their candidates that they support, let's get real, win. How dare Rasmussen reports ask the American public whether or not they trust the results of their own elections and then publish those results? Haven't you heard? There was no, quote, widespread evidence of election fraud, unquote. And if you believe that, then you're backward. Second, Rasmussen must answer the following questions about its methodology, which Mr. Mitchell has so far failed to answer for 538 senior reporter Nathaniel Reiki 3 times. And this is when I saw these questions when they were first sent. Or I heard of them. It was like, you believe this crap? I mean, what is this? It's this. The answer to these questions are all publicly on most of the vast majority of them are publicly on Rasmussen's website. This survey seems to indicate that Rasmussen's weighting targets or sampling strategies are not well tuned. And this survey right here is, of course, most Arizona voters believe election irregularities affected outcome. Since the outcome of the poll does not match the observable election result. How are you addressing that methodological problem? Folks, there are many, many, many issues with this question. First and foremost, people lie about who they voted for. And there are different ways to figure out whether they're telling the truth or not. But this has long been a debate in the polling industry. You're not supposed to wait for how people tell you they voted. Some people do, and others argue you're not supposed to do that. People lie. There is nothing wrong with how he weighted that poll, and this is what Philip Bump from the Washington Post immediately tried to attack, and not only right-wing pollsters, but basically everybody on Twitter told him he's an idiot and doesn't know what he's talking about. Edison Research's exit polls are not 100% accurate. And waiting to exit polls is also a very well debated topic. Personally, age, race, gender, geography, education. For me, that's the go-to. You can't, I don't even like weighting by party, which Rasmussen does, and that's their prerogative. A lot of pollsters do. But the problem in my mind has always been, if you do that, you're waiting in the past. There will be people, the exit pollster recorded as Republicans, who will tell you months later when you poll them, they're independents. What Mark did is not out of the realm of norm when it comes to how he weighted that survey. The real problem is that the survey doesn't reflect the results of the election, which is a contested election. People have bent backwards to excuse the fact that those signatures don't match. And my gripe, which I testified under oath about, is that I have never in an exit poll in my life seen that kind of disparity with intent to vote and those by vote method who ended up coming out to vote. Almost everybody who told us they would agree to take the exit poll and we're going to vote by mail voted. There was a 20-point disparity in election day vote. But even still, even if I adjusted for that, you still would not get Hobbs in the lead. It would just be more like a Lake +1. This tweet seems to indicate, and this is one that, again, there are legitimate questions that could easily be cleared up. The tweet says, because we aren't stupid, the only 2 phone calls I get on my home phone are from Rasmussen and Red Cross. One wants my opinion and one wants my blood. I give both. Laugh out loud. And Rasmussen did thumbs up. And what they say is this tweet seems to indicate that Rasmussen's IVR polling is reaching the same people, or at least person, multiple times. Is the phone portion of the poll relying on a panel of some type? If not, why would the same citizen get routine calls from the same pollster? Well, first of all, being called more than once is not necessarily routine. I have personally been polled by the same pollster a couple of times myself. It is theoretically possible for that to happen, although it is pretty much unlikely. The difference is Rasmussen has a voter file. They've been using it for years. It is possible somebody got the same phone call, but what they're doing with the phone portion, if they're using a list that's being recycled over a period of time, isn't much different than a panel. It's not much different. That is something, though, that you could legitimately clarify, and I understand that question. It's like what I said. They mix bullshit in with actual legitimate inquiry. It is possible. I get that. With us, it's going to be how we do things. It's going to be very, 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 very unlikely, because every time we pull another list from the voter file. And considering we're talking about 200 million records roughly, it's highly unlikely in a national poll. Now, in a state, it's more than likely you're going to get polled. If somebody tracks daily, you're going to get polled multiple times. Depends on how big the population is. Perhaps related to number 2, your methodology states calls are placed to randomly selected phone numbers through a process that ensures appropriate geographic representation. What is the process being applied? And what does randomly selected mean here? If not RDD, which means random digital dial. Where are you getting your call lists? If they have their own, you can still randomly pull those numbers for the night off of your database. Also, in case he doesn't know this, most IVR software has an auto dialer that you can set to randomize. So I'm not sure why that question was even rewritten. The method, and by the way, to ensure appropriate geographic representation is very simple. The entire list is not pulled in a targeted random fashion. It's pulled as random. Due to the principles of randomization, if you're pulling from a large list at random, you're supposed to end up with at least rough geographic representation. Maybe the Northeast is 23% instead of 19%, but it's going to be ballpark. And then, if there are weights that need to be tweaked from there, then that's different. You can do it. The methodology mentions this is a real funny one. Demographically diverse panel for online respondents. Is this panel proprietary or are you contracting it out? If the former, how do you recruit and ensure balanced representation on the panel? If the latter, to whom are you contracting out? I could probably point to a dozen polls released in the month of June that did not answer that question. This is something that we have long said is something that should be released. Whether you're using Dynata, you're using Cint, whatever it may be. In the case of NBC News, sometimes they contract it out to SurveyMonkey. Reuters uses Ipsos, which is, I believe, Amerispeaks. I mean, that should be known. Emerson follows the Transparency Initiative from APOR in 2016. That was after they botched 2016. And they do a great job. It's in a PDF. It's called the Transparency Initiative Checklist. We did it for a while too, until people just stopped caring. So instead of doing it, we just put out a PDF. And locals, you know what I'm talking about, and which explains all of that anyway. It's just not in a checklist format, but all of the information is out there. And I know who that panel is, by the way. I'm pretty sure Rasmussen has said so publicly before, but nobody else has asked to clarify this. I know the panels they're using. The methodology mentions you weight by age, race, gender, political party, and other factors. What are the other factors? Again, can be a legitimate question, and I actually think I know the answer to that. I'm waiting for Mark to answer it on Monday, but this goes into question 6. The answer to that goes into question 6. The methodology also states For political surveys, Census Bureau data provides a starting point, and a series of screening questions are used to determine likely voters. The questions involve voting history, interest in the current campaign, and likely voting intentions. Does this mean you are waiting first and screening second? Are you serious? First of all, well, let me finish reading. If so, is there additional rebalancing for the likely voter sample? For example, women are less likely than men to say they're definitely going to vote, but they usually make up at least half of the electorate anyway. You and I, we've talked about this a lot. First of all, that's not always true. So that's not really a true statement. That's why we have our likely voter the way we have it. We do it as a percentage. Certain is basically 90+%. All right. Likely, meaning greater than 50-50. Unlikely, less than 50, but greater than 30. Unlikely, being less than 30. 0 is certain not to vote. Or I'm just not going to vote. It is not always true that men are more likely to say that. You know that from countless nights and days of going through our crosstabs. But I do understand the old way of thinking, because he is thinking like a live caller pollster. All right, so that is not true for every data mode. The fact of the matter is, however, some of the information that he's asking for answers, you don't know with any other pollster. You don't know. They didn't tell you whether or not they screened first and then rebalanced. And what he's really talking about is recalibrating, reweighting. Part of this is none of their business. If they have a proprietary likely voter model, it's none of their business. There are tons of polls out there. You see it all the time. Proprietary likely voter model. But the fact of the matter is, with Rasmussen, on numerous surveys, you can clearly see that they screen first, as most people do. So, again, and then they're being held to a different standard than just about any other poll that you've had out here. In addition, please tell us, where do the benchmarks for your non-census weighting variables such as political party come from? It's right on the website. They've said it on Twitter many, many times. Once or twice a year when they readjust for political party, they explain it in detail. Rasmussen reports, since its inception, has used a survey of consumers, Consumer Sentiment Index, conducted, I believe, by the University of Michigan. This is publicly known and stated information. Does Rasmussen Reports check its likely voter screens against any ongoing estimate of the proportion of the population belonging to a given party? That's ridiculous. That's just an attempt to try to trip you up. In other words, they want to know whether or not they're making it more Republican. They don't care whether or not they make it more Democrat, right, folks? When Monmouth got involved in a controversy about this in 2016, when the Gateway Pundit published an article accusing Monmouth of fudging the results that showed Trump ahead in Pennsylvania, I believe it was, because they weighted higher for Democrats after they did their screen. Everybody ran to Monmouth's aid and said, even if they did, that's perfectly acceptable. It's a debate about whether or not you should do that, but there's no wrong answer. It's pollster preference. They want to trip Mark up here and get him to basically say that sometimes he puts the thumb on the scale for a certain political party. How does Rasmussen Reports account for the biases introduced into its sample by not calling cell phones? Again, publicly available right on the website. They use a demographically diverse panel, just like everybody else who doesn't call cell phones uses. Failure to reply or failure to notify us of an intent to speedily reply by the end of the day on Friday, June 30th, 2023, will be taken as a final concession of our grounds for a ban. The ban would take effect imminently thereafter. Thank you for your time, Elliot Morris, ABC News. Look, I've talked to the guys. They're not going to answer him. They're not going to answer him. The only answer they're putting up is Your own stupid model has us as one of the most accurate pollsters. Your former boss said, let's all give a bow to Rasmussen, Trafalgar, and I believe it was Atlas for that election cycle. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I mean, I don't believe anyway that even if they were to respond, the only thing that could prevent the ban is more pressure that they're getting from, you know, from like other people in media. I just don't think that. Sorry, Norm, you made me laugh. I'm sorry, Norm. I know they can be a pain in the butt. They should honestly have local time zone parameters set. So let's say whether they're using a call center and they have live interviews, if that person tried a random dial and it was in California, but they're in New York, for instance, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and they say, okay, we're going to actually start polling at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday or 10 o'clock on Saturday. Now, I don't do that. I don't want to give all the parameters out, but depending on mode, we have different parameters. Texting, we do start a little bit earlier than live, but it should block that agent from being able to call your number. So I don't understand. I mean, I've seen other pollsters with their technology. Some of them are still working on like ridiculous, out of what's the word, obsolete stuff. So, that's sad to hear that's happening to you. It shouldn't even be allowed. And in text messages, I mean, if you're using any kind of P2P survey software, they should never be able to text you. The only thing you'll get, I mean, if there's an online panel you're on or somebody targets you digitally, when it's online, it's routine most of the time trying to find when your activity is at its highest. So let's say you're intercepted by a survey, then they'll want to get you when you're at your high peak, and you could be up there doing research at midnight and they'll hit you up. But that's online. Anything else, there really very clearly should be within the software the ability of the pollster to set those parameters for each survey, and unfortunately it doesn't look like they're doing it. I always thought the only people who were polled were those who watch Wheel of Fortune. IVR is going to get the Wheel of Fortune polls, poll takers. And I don't want to give this guy any credit, but I don't want to give him any notoriety at all. But I feel like this is something I do have to bring up because you segued me into it. Some of the stuff I've been hearing lately is just out of this world false. All right. So I'm not going to bring up the person. I'm not going to bring up, goes to your point though, Rich. I'm not going to bring up the person. I'm not even going to bring up his comment, even though I did put it on locals because I don't want to give him any more attention. I don't punch down, but the latest polling criticism from Team DeSantis' influencers is totally false. And it goes to Rich, your comment. They're now just making shit up as they go to explain what is the predictable effect of a poorly run campaign. You fall in the polls. With a candidate who struggles, you fall in the polls. The latest claim is, you ready? Generally in the sense that, and all of you, I hope, all of you followers and viewers by now, you know that not only is what they said not true, but it's totally backward. And it's being repeated by his other influencers and followers, and it's just not. I'm worried soon I'm going to see this on like cable news, and hosts are not going to be able to know enough about polling to shoot back. But educated professional class voters participate in polls at much higher rates. And that is even more true when we're talking about live callers, especially those using those live interview data collection modes. And it just so happens that the media polls, university polls, most of those favor that mode. So if anything, that should be helping DeSantis, not hurting him. The primary issue that has been plaguing the polling industry now for decades, especially in recent years, has been the increased difficulty in reaching working class voters and certain minorities, particularly non-urban and non-exurban areas. All of that should, again, benefit Ron DeSantis, not hurt him. If anything, it suggests that his real support may actually be lower. And we've been talking about this for weeks, but this is why mixed mode surveys like Emerson, us, and others that are mixed mode generally do see, even though we were in the middle for a while, but it's been very clear that all modes have shown more support for Trump, but they generally reflect stronger support for Donald Trump when they're mixed. The exceptions are panels like YouGov and others. Why? Because those panels were designed and are overly educated, over exurban, over urban. So even when you get Republicans, you get like the Bill Kristol Republicans, or too many of them. You want to get the Bill Kristol Republicans, but you really want to get all of them. You want to get a representative sample of Republicans. But the point and the problem is that those Republicans are more responsive, and they make up more of these panels that are not, I'm sorry, but it's just true. They're poorly designed panels. During COVID, the Zoomer class, the professional class had nothing better to do. Tons of these panels exploded with overly educated people, overly credentialed. DeSantis's problem with educated voters is not that more educated professional types don't take polls. His biggest problem is now that he's losing them even to Donald Trump. Some of these influencers are becoming no better than the left-wing corporate media in pushing disinformation. That's Russia collusion hoax level bullshit. Pardon my French. But that is not true at all. And so, Rich, as an answer to your question, interactive voice response reaches the Wheel of Fortune voter. It's a great way to put it. But in Rasmussen's case, that's why they use a panel to offset that. For me, it's rare that I can't reach those older IVR voters with other modes other than IVR. And I feel like I'm reaching a more representative sample with other modes anyway. I have learned some lessons over the years for midterms, for instance. Online may not be as much of a percentage of our surveys in the future, because through the phone now, with the advent of peer-to-peer, when we went back and looked at a bunch of our surveys, we didn't really need online for many of those races, but it will be a crapshoot. It's a learning process, because we would have had like a Warnock +5 in the first round of voting in Georgia without online. And we had a Walker +1. Warnock wound up leading, I believe, by 1 in that first round. I'd rather have a Walker +1 than a Warnock +5. A Warnock +5, even though Warnock wound up being ahead by a little less than a point, is outside the sampling era and less reflective of the true state of a competitive race. A Walker +1 is a coin flip. And if it ends up Warnock +1, I'm still happy with that. I would not be happy overstating someone's support, even though they're the eventual winner. Like Pennsylvania, for instance, which cornballs on Team DeSantis like to point out. An Oz +1 is more accurate than a Fetterman +8, idiots. So anyway. Oh no, more leaked audio. And there is a big thing. I don't want to. You're telling. It's Q&A time, and Laura's like, go to the comments. And I'm looking, and the first comment I see is Kurt Schlichter, my friend, saying Trump would lose Iowa. Listen, there's a certain level of delusion here. Again, the Emerson poll, which is one of the few polls that has done well in states like Iowa, clearly show that Trump is like twice as strong as DeSantis in Iowa, which means, they're just getting a little desperate here, folks. I'm not going to respond to every stupid comment. Kurt, I love you, man, but that's simpleton level stupidity. All right. especially since Donald Trump is literally the first Republican to carry Iowa in 20 years. Almost. Well, now 20 years. At the time, it was 12. Ron DeSantis is moving much more in the mold of a Bush and Romney kind of Republican. And both of them struggled severely in those areas of the state. That's insane. Donald Trump literally carried every age group in the state of Iowa. Ron DeSantis has no support with young people, generally in the general election or in the primary. He just has none. And for those who say, oh, this is what's so crazy about those polls that show Trump doing better. He's doing so much better with young people and non-white people. And it's like, oh my God, we've been talking about this for weeks. Trump did better with young people in Florida in 2020 than DeSantis did. Why? Because DeSantis was missing all of those other voters. He won that big victory on the backs of older voters. We went over this in great detail. In great detail. Why can Trump win the 2nd congressional district in Maine and nobody else can? We just went over this last week. Young voters. And because he was able to carry that, and albeit by a tiny margin, he was still able to carry the 45 to 64 age group, which is big. Because you're going to lose seniors in Maine. I know that's crazy, but it's true. Now, over time, that's going to change because that 45 to 64 will become the new senior in Maine. And if it's I don't know, even if it's, we'll have to see, even if it's an America First party, Bruce Poliquin wasn't a rhino. He did turn away from America First as much as he was in the past. I don't know if that hurt him or not, but he did not perform like Trump with those age groups. But saying something like that is just incredibly stupid. So also Jim Lee, this Rust Belt issue, we'll do the Rust Belt poll again real soon, but I'm telling you folks, it was not even close. Not even close. The two candidates have their weaknesses and they have their strengths. And the problem with the DeSantis coalition is that it looks like a George W. Bush coalition. That coalition has not been a majority or even close to a majority or a winning electoral college majority in years. It's dead. It's gone. It's buried. And somebody who supports a 6-week abortion ban is going to have a very difficult time in Michigan and in Pennsylvania. Someone who supports or does not support tariffs is going to have a very difficult time across the Rust Belt altogether. They will just vote for their traditional ancestral party. You have to give them a reason not to. And this is getting, there are literally only 3 polls, 2 of which are conducted by the same pollster pretending to be someone else. It's not pretending. They're just like I was saying before. You have Ron DeSantis' own pollster. Then you have his own firm polling for NBC News with that. That's the same poll. And then you have WP Intel, Chris Wilson at WP Intel, which is a known Republican establishment pollster. Alan Fung did not win. Everybody else shows a very, very, very clear difference. Even Morning Consult now. And the thing that is significant that everybody refuses to acknowledge is that myself, for the Epoch Times, and for the Public Polling Project in 2020, Rasmussen reports, Emerson, ABC News, who else? CBS, even YouGov, other YouGov contractors. I laid them all out the other day. None of us found Trump leading nationally in 2020. Never. Oh, Harvard Harris. None of us from these very different corners of the polling universe all show the same thing. The only ones who show something different are ones who have connections to the campaign. Which one are you going to believe? Right? Right. All right. So, no, it does matter what their abortion stance is. It does. It will matter. It most definitely will matter, especially to independents who don't have a religious affiliation, which is another one of those voting blocks that we have isolated as a bigger Trump block. For some reason, Republicans as a party have been suffering as a result of the rise of the nuns, as my pastor says it. People with no religious affiliation. Donald Trump does so much better with those people than any other Republican. Why is that? Maybe it's name recognition. Maybe it's because he was a former president with a record. It doesn't matter. The fact is he does. And I don't see anybody duplicating that. God, it's already 1:55. So this really wasn't a shorter, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The way the delegates are anyway right now, even if, my locals is having a delegate fight right now, or a delegate conversation. I want to bring this up. I did have this up here to talk about. Let's bring this up. Anyway, it's curious. Let me just leave that segment saying it's curious what Rasmussen will do. I know they will not respond, so I'm not curious of what they will do. I mean, I'm just curious what ABC will do, because I know Rasmussen is not going to respond. They're not going to entertain it. They're making a point that you are not an authority on the polling industry or pollsters, so we are not getting into this game. I can tell you, multiple university pollsters, they all hate these people. They always hated Nate Silver. They hate 538. And that's true of a certain pollster who runs a certain university poll in a certain garden state, who's generally considered to be left-wing. He absolutely can't stand those people. And then there is another one who runs a certain poll in a certain northeastern state who is generally be considered to not himself lean to the right, but his polls to be a little bit more favorable to the right. They all hate him. Everybody I know hates him. They can't stand him. And they don't like someone telling them that they're an authority over them. So this is a reality we need to talk about here. One, the Quinnipiac poll in the state of Pennsylvania, and two, the Siena College poll in the state of New York. All right, New York Times poll. Look, I put this map up here to show you by shade the advantage in delegates through these states. DeSantis is riding everything on the state of Iowa. It has 40 delegates. That's a lot, especially for the population of the state. It's proportionately allocated, however, and Trump ended up running away with the amount of delegates that he had in 2020. Ted Cruz beat him in the state of Iowa in 2016, but it didn't matter. They both had generally separated by a few delegates, and that's including Marco Rubio. So my friend Kurt, who somebody put the comment up, what are you going to do when Trump loses Iowa? I mean, I don't know what you're basing that on, other than reports that Never Back Down is paying people for votes. Other than that, if you're looking at actual polls, you're talking about closing a 35-point gap or a 30-point gap, and that's incredibly difficult to do. Now, Trump should debate in Iowa, because if he doesn't, those voters are going to be pissed. They want to see you. All right. So being a leader, I'm telling you, you should debate. All right. Now, most of the time, that's against conventional wisdom. The front runner has only everything to lose. He has nothing to gain from debating with the Keebler Elf Squad. They're all going to be looking at him. The person who needs Donald Trump to debate the most is Ron DeSantis. Why? Because then everyone will be attacking a guy who is not there to defend himself, which is going to look stupid. And then they're going to turn their ire on Ron DeSantis. It's only a matter of time before the bottom tier candidates. And I think the time will be between Iowa and New Hampshire, because a lot of these people are staking their claim on New Hampshire and South Carolina. So if Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and Chris Christie do not knock Ron DeSantis down before New Hampshire and South Carolina, they're going to have a problem. So eventually the attention will turn to who is going to be the second tier leader, or the bottom tier leader. Really, it's not even second tier. Being in the teens is not second tier when somebody is at 58, 59, 60%. That means there is a top tier candidate and there are bottom feeders. And the fight will eventually turn into who's the top dog among the bottom feeders. But even if DeSantis were to do some miracle in Iowa, he's got nowhere else to go after that. That's the truth. And I showed you this map to show you the delegates and how much they matter. Trump is completely dominating in the South, all the way up to Arizona, if you count the Southwest and Nevada. Now he's even dominating California, although we know they are playing rules games there. But look at the poll that came out in Pennsylvania from Quinnipiac. All right, let me read you again the rules. It's a winner-take-all loophole state. Trump is at about 50%. DeSantis was at like what, 18 or 20, right? Something like that. Let me read you the rules. It's a closed primary, which hurts DeSantis. 51 of the Commonwealth's 67 delegates to the National Convention are directly elected through their name. This is what they call a loophole or a beauty contest primary. They will be directly elected through their names that appear on the ballot in a loophole type primary in which delegates are elected separately from presidential preference. Each of the 17 congressional districts is allocated 3 delegates. So 51 51 equals 17 districts times 3. Trump will have a slate of delegates. DeSantis will have a slate of delegates. Last time there was a lot of talk about confusion, and maybe Cruz or Kasich or somebody else could take advantage of that delegate confusion, as if primary voters in Pennsylvania do not know how this goes by now. It didn't happen. Trump crushed it, and that was that. The Quinnipiac poll is particularly damning for DeSantis again because his pollster continuously shows that DeSantis is actually competitive there, when in fact he is not, and Trump leads Biden, DeSantis does not. This is basically a margin. Donald Trump takes all of those delegates, basically, if the poll is correct. All 67, goodbye. In the state of New York, 91 delegates, it is winner take most. Siena College poll had Trump in the 60s. Altogether, the second tier candidates had 30 something. Ron DeSantis alone, however, only gets about 9 or 10. I think it's a low. He's been a low of 6 in the Siena poll, I believe, and a high of 11, I think. Anyway, let's look at the rules. 78 districts are bound to congressional candidates based on the primary results in each of the state's 27 congressional districts. If a candidate receives more than 50% or only one candidate meets the 20% threshold, all 3 district delegates go to that candidate. If at least 2 receive at least 20, the leader gets 2 delegates, the other gets 1. So far, Ron DeSantis is not at 20% in any congressional district in the state of New York. Not one. That means Donald Trump takes every single one of these 91 delegates. There are also at-large delegates, by the way. And of course, they're bound to the results on a winner-take-most basis statewide. So if statewide Ron DeSantis hits a certain threshold in some of these districts, he could get some of these delegates. But if Trump wounds up meeting the 50% threshold statewide, all of the at-large delegates will go to him no matter whether or not any DeSantis or anyone hits 20%. Doesn't matter. Trump will take all of the at-large delegates. It's time to start looking at the math and what the polls mean when you're looking at the math. That's a lot of delegates. None of this is going to change. Even if DeSantis wins Iowa, it's not going to change because Trump's going to go on and win New Hampshire. By the way, in the state of New Hampshire, let's go through those delegate rules. All 22 are bound based on the results of the primary. They must meet a 10% threshold. According to the last 3 polls combined, Christie and DeSantis are battling to meet that threshold. Trump is above or at just under or slightly above 50. And there was, I think, one poll where Trump was at 60, but I think that's an outlier. Anyway, if thresholds are met, vote share is calculated in proportion to the total statewide vote. Multiply each percentage by 22 and round to the nearest whole number. If delegates remain, they are awarded to the winner of the statewide vote, which at this time would, of course, be Donald Trump. There is a way, if you have a big enough lead, to really stretch your legs a little bit more than in Iowa. So that would move everybody to South Carolina, where, again, we've gone over these results before, but 50 delegates, winner take most. Trump's lead right now would turn South Carolina into a winner take all, 50 delegates, goodbye. So it doesn't really matter when we're headed into these other contests. If you look at the contest schedule for Super Tuesday, so the answer, I'm doing this to say, look, what are you going to do when Trump loses Iowa? Even if he was, even if we even if we ignore the polls and we entertain the possibility that Ron DeSantis closes a 40-point gap, 35, let's be nice, 25. Then we have New Hampshire. That's going to Trump. Nevada is now a primary, which means more non-whites. Even if it goes back to a caucus, they weren't able to outmaneuver him on the ground in Nevada. So the party's trying to sue so they can go back to being a caucus so they can try to stop Donald Trump. If it becomes a primary and anyone can vote, then Trump is obviously going to use his youth and MAGA and non-white support combined to steamroll everybody in Nevada, which is what happened the last 2 times. Nevada actually gave him a bigger victory than New Hampshire or South Carolina in 2016. South Carolina, again, winner take most. Then Michigan, we all just saw that latest poll. Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia are all on March 5th. Trump's lead in we don't have anything for Alaska, but Trump's lead in Alabama is huge. Trump's lead in Arkansas is huge. By the way, they're both winner take most, 49 and 40 delegates respectively. California, where Trump now is above 50%, even if they try their maneuvering, if he cracks 50, he will take all 169 delegates. Colorado, we have almost no data for, but the fact that Colorado is younger may hurt anti-Trump forces. Maine, Trump's lead is enormous. It's winner take most. Massachusetts, Trump's lead is 45 points. It's winner take most. And by the way, almost every single one of these states, they're winner take most, but margins like that mean winner take all. Minnesota, what do you think is going to happen there? North Carolina, we know what's going to happen there. I don't care. Don't show me no public opinion strategies poll that's totally out of the mainstream. Eastern Carolina University, myself, and I don't know. I don't think there's an Emerson. Emerson did a good job of polling the primary in 2022. Nobody else did. So please don't show me anybody else's poll. Ted Budd won because he was endorsed by Donald Trump. That's it. Oklahoma is one state that DeSantis absolutely can play in. It is a crazy kind of closed primary, but not really state. Governor Stitt has endorsed DeSantis. However, there is something else at play there, that Trump's support in Texas is so strong, bordering Oklahoma, and that Governor Stitt was on his way to lose until Donald Trump endorsed him. So while I do think DeSantis can play in Oklahoma, it's important to remember that the governor himself could not win re-election without Donald Trump. Tennessee, where do you think what's going to happen there? That's obviously a Trump state. Texas is a major Trump state right now. That's 162, winner take most. That if he cracks close to what some of these numbers are now, where he's nearing 60 in Texas, if he does that, then that's sayonara, all 162. So it means he could take all, if not all, of the delegates from the 2 big-ass states in the entire contest. The 2 biggest states in the entire contest, most delegates, are on Super Tuesday. And currently Trump is leading with either a majority, like, low to mid 50s in California, or mid to high 50s like he's leading in Texas now. The debate is not going to change that. Something dramatic has to happen. And I know what that is. I'm just not saying it. I'm not. If I felt like, how can I put this? If I felt like the non-Trump forces were conducting themselves in a respectable, not even respectable, honorable fashion, I would do it, but they're not. So I'm keeping this to the vest. Laura and I alone know, because I told Laura. Utah, 40 delegates. That is a state I do think DeSantis can make a play in because of the Never Trump LDS establishment. It's a very rhino state. For people who don't, you realize, oh my God, Utah's so red. It is rhino through and through. And so far, the last poll I saw, Trump was up by like 1. In the state of Vermont, that's going to Trump, 17 delegates, winner take all. And Virginia is going to Trump. It's huge. And you would think, well, all these, what if the Youngkin gets behind DeSantis? He is going to get behind DeSantis. I just don't think it's going to matter. People are going to realize the difference between gubernatorial elections and national office. Son of a bitch, how am I muted again? Somebody had asked me what muted me. I don't even know. That's weird. Anyway, let's get back to the question. What was the question was? Thanks, Elon. I'm gonna need you. You're like my go-to person for this. What was? Oh, here we go with the friggin'. Here we go with the. This is East Carolina. They're pretty good. They are pretty good. Yeah, I'm telling you, Ohio is not competitive. Look at that. Trump plus 44. By the way, real quick before I get back to your polling question, which is up right now, Ohio is winner take all 74 delegates. So goodbye. And Ohio is also, that's just not going to happen. March 19th, say after Super Tuesday, he would crush it. But my point I was trying to make with the polling is that you never saw anyone have that lead. And with the, if it was not for the trick that the Cruz campaign played, he would not have won the Iowa caucuses. Trump would have won it if the robocalls and the emails didn't go out to not only caucus goers, but to Carson's own precinct people that he had dropped out, and they were encouraging them to advocate on behalf of Ted Cruz and caucus for Ted Cruz. So you did not need to dupe that many people to change the outcome of the caucus. And that is in fact what happened. All right. So, you can erase a 4-point lead. You can erase a 5-point lead, folks, with organization. This is what DeSantis's people are doing now is exactly what Cruz had done, only they're using a PAC to do it. Cruz used its campaign. And that's why there are counties that are actually flipping out over this. They think it's illegal. I've talked to a couple people about it. It's not clear whether it's illegal or not what DeSantis's campaign and PAC are doing in Iowa. I don't think so. It's just dirty and different than what people are used to. And I think there's something that Iowans are inherently not liking about PACs serving this role that the candidate himself is supposed to serve. But I get it, why they were doing it. It's actually kind of a smart move. That being said, even with the Hercules version of what Cruz tried to do, you're not going to erase a 35-point lead through organization, folks. You're not. It's not going to happen. And even if you did, and you eked out a win, they were separated by delegate counts by nothing. Few delegates. Even though Rubio was in third place, he got almost as many delegates as Trump. And Cruz only got a few more delegates than Trump did. It's proportional. It's not like a 44-point lead in a winner-take-all state like Ohio. Or, by the way, it's not like a 60-plus percentage point majority in a winner-take-most state like New York. Delegate math matters, folks. Delegate math matters. So that's where we're at. All right. Wow, it's 2:16. Laura's going to be like, time to build my chairs. Yeah, it's like traveling. And then I already made her wait for as long as I can. So I got to finish up work a little bit early today so I could try to put together some more. I got honeydews to do, folks. I got bulbs out again. I got honeydews and it's time. And I think for my own sake, I think I want to barbecue this weekend. Therapeutic to me. You know what I mean, guys? You know what I mean. Maybe even some of you ladies know what I mean. And definitely like my lawn is therapeutic to me. So, yeah, it is what it is. I think you're going to see Moreno, who, by the way, was down in this primary. People aren't really paying attention. And then I do think that Bernie Moreno will get Trump's endorsement this time. He was a great candidate running last time, but he decided that, let's see who more the latest. Let's see. Moreno's running worse against. Yeah, Moreno's running worse against Brown, but that's probably because he's not as well known. Dolan appears to want to run again. That's name recognition making him a little bit stronger. But LaRose is ahead, 17 Dolan, 14 Moreno, 7. I think if whoever gives Trump that endorsement, that's a wrap, folks. Come on. That's over. And Moreno bowed out last time because he had said to Team Trump and Vance, I think Vance is the right candidate for the moment, and I think he has the best chance of winning. So I'm going to step back. He did something Laura always says is so rare in Republican politics. They have Messiah syndrome, these fake Christians, a lot of these fake rhino Christians. They have Messiah syndrome, and they feel like you just heard DeSantis with Messiah syndrome before. I'm such a good leader. I forget about loyalty to Trump. I'm being loyal to God running for president. He gave the ultimate Messiah complex. What do you mean loyalty? Loyalty to who? I'm a holy warrior, man. God has sent me on this mission. I must be the nominee. God wills it. Like he's a friggin' Templar or something. God wills it. Should we play that again? I'm not being funny here. It's true. Let's see. Hold on. Come on. Don't fail me now. Where's the full history here? I had it up. I think I got to search for bobblehead. I'm not kidding, because somebody had written that he was doing the bobblehead again. I mean, if you listen to what he's saying, that is the Messiah complex, and Moreno did not do that. Bernie, there we go. Let's end that with that clip, because I think it generally ties everything that we've talked about together here today. And then we'll go. Oh, Sunday. Don't forget, Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, June is almost up. So if you want to shift from either YouTube, or you want to just shift from being a member on Locals to a supporter on Locals, now's the time to do it. We're running out of time. Come July, it will go up. It's not going to go up a lot. But if you want to be grandfathered in at the $5, then you have to get in today, folks. Okay? You got to get in today. So join the locals community, peoplespundit.locals.com, which, by the way, anyway, if you really like the interaction, and I love all you guys who are on YouTube as members, you can either move over or you can stay. I have people who are staying and doing both. But on locals, we communicate with each other so much more. And then the community communicates with each other, not just me. It's a it's a better atmosphere, or the atmosphere, the environment on locals is so much more conducive to an intellectual conversation than regular social media, and certainly more than YouTube, because we just have community notes on YouTube and community comment sections. We can't really have discussions and share things with each other and talk with each other the way we do on locals. All right. So again, get in before this way you're grandfathered in. And we'll come July, it's gonna bounce up a little bit. YouTube, if you want to go to locals and no longer be a member of YouTube and you're on a monthly, there's a code in the community thing for you. Grab it, put it in at checkout on locals, and that's going to cover the cost of your YouTube membership for the month. So you're not double paying for the months. All right. Yeah, let's bring it on up again. I don't want to give somebody a there we go. Let's bring it on up one more time. Sunday, Eastern Daylight Time. We're going to talk. Nope, that's different. My God, where's my book? I got to find it. Bernard Bailyn and the Ideological Origins of the American Revolution. We only have a few more done before it's over. What a fantastic book. It might be in my drawer here. Might be in one of my drawers. Nope, looks like my little booger got it. Yeah, he did. Oh, yeah, it's on the floor over there. Okay. Yeah, so we're wrapping up the final chapter, chapter 6. We may be able to get through chapter 6 this week, but we have a couple end pieces that are like ending thoughts that he wrote in the book that I think are worth going over. So we only still, though, nevertheless, only have a couple more weeks of it. All right. So, God wills it, folks. God wills it. All right. Join locals.
You're disloyal. Do you feel that way?
Disloyal to who? I mean, politicians have to earn support. They're not entitled to support. I did a lot for him in 2016 and 2020, by the way. I was happy to do it. But at the end of the day, I'm loyal to my family, to our Constitution, and to the good Lord. And I have a vision. I think I'm the guy that can beat Biden. But even more importantly, no more excuses on these issues. I'm going to get all of this stuff done. We'll have a plan on day one to get going and get cracking. We'll give you 2 great terms for 8 years and really get the country on a fundamentally different path. I think I'm the guy to do it. And so I have the responsibility to step up and serve.
I have a responsibility. God wills it. Am I wrong? Am I hearing this wrong? That's what I hear. Anyway, that's the opposite of what you heard from Bernie Moreno or what people behind the scenes heard. So I think he probably will get that endorsement. And if he does, then those polls will obviously change dramatically. We saw what happened with JD Vance. It took a whole lot of money to keep JD Vance's margin from being significant double digits. Yeah, I mean, this is, you guys hear it the way I hear it. You do. I mean, you all hear it the way I do too. Neil, all of you as well. Have a great weekend, folks. Have a safe weekend. Locals, YouTube, I'll see you on Sunday. And probably another little short comment. This was supposed to be short, but I wanted to make it a good one. All right. So stay cool, stay safe. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, sign up for locals, grandfather yourself in. See you soon. God wills it.